You're listening to episode 18 of the Physical Education Podcast. Today you're going to learn about the elaborate ways in which your brain tries to discourage you from changing your life and the simple methods you can implement to finally overcome pain. Hi, I'm Pierre Morand, and you're about to learn about the hidden and often misunderstood causes of chronic pain. For 15 years, I suffered with chronic pain with no cause or end in sight. I tried everything I could find, but was often left with unanswered questions and conflicting advice. So I decided to take matters into my own hands and to become a physical therapist. I studied everything I could about pain, about the body, and about health. Along the way, I realized that the solutions to my pain and health issues were within me. I didn't need someone to fix me. I needed to reclaim ownership of my body and fix myself. More importantly, I needed to fix myself while honoring and understanding my body's own wisdom and capacity for self-healing. Since then, I've worked on bringing this knowledge to others in pain, combining pain science, psychology, biomechanics, nutrition, and neurology to provide the light bulb moments and self-awareness to take control. Because eventually most people in pain realize they need to understand the bigger picture of what causes chronic pain. The purpose of this podcast is to help you see and navigate that bigger picture so that you can finally reclaim control of your health and overcome pain once and for all. So last week we looked at the topic of identity and how to be the kind of person that could overcome pain. We looked at how your identity, your characteristics and your beliefs may be keeping you stuck in pain. We talked about working in reverse and how we need to be first, then do, and then have, because most people think in terms of have, do, be. So they think, if only I had this, then I could do that, and then I would be happy. If only I could have a pain-free body, then I could do the things I want to do, and then I would be happy. And as a follow-on from that discussion that we had last week, I'm going to talk about the best strategies that I know of to change your habits, because while we need to consider first and foremost our ways of being and our identity, we need to address that first. One of the most tangible and productive ways of creating change is by analyzing, understanding, and changing your habits. So the first thing to understand is what we call habit voice. If you've ever tried to abstain from something or to start a new habit, you'll be familiar with that voice in your head. It's that one that is built, builds the most solid and convincing case for why you should, in fact, ignore your new ambitions and just eat the damn Mars bar or skip the grueling gym session. We call that habit voice. It's that really, really reasonable, sometimes really reasonable voice that's trying to convince you to keep doing things the way you used to do them or to take the easy route. And it's the voice that wants to keep you as you are. Where you are now is safe. We talk a lot about the brain and nervous system, particularly when it comes to pain. It's all about safety. The body feels safe with what it has now. It might not be great, but it's familiar and it's safe. And anything different, even though that might seem great, represents uncertainty, and it represents perhaps a threat to your safety. So where you are now, as much as it might be unpleasant, that does offer a sense of safety to your body. And where you want to go, the life you want, a pain-free life, that may threaten your safety on some unconscious level. So the thing with habit voice, we can give it all this power, but it's just a stream of consciousness. It's only a thought, or it's a series of thoughts, and it only has as much power as you grant it. So if you think about the amount of thoughts that you have as you're walking down the street, most of these just pass in and out of your consciousness and you never dwell on them again. So you can try this if you're walking, if you're driving, whatever it is. You'll notice tons of different things: the cars, people, sounds, lights, whatever is happening. But it just passes through your consciousness and you don't think about it. And, later on that day you won't remember it, and you don't need to remember it, and you don't feel bad about not remembering it. So all these things just sort of pass through. And that voice, that habit voice, those thoughts are technically no different. Now they can pull on your heartstrings, they can have an emotional charge to you, and obviously there's a reason why they're cropping up for you. But you can let them simply drift off. You can let them come into consciousness and let them pass. The key really is to dismiss them and then shift your focus elsewhere. Because, and this is really important, you should write this down if you can. If not, it's going to be in the notes anyway, but I want you to remember this, is that you can't want what you're not thinking about. So it's hard to want something that you're not thinking about, but then when you think about it, obviously you want it, or if it's something that you're likely to want. So it probably seems a bit overly simplistic, but yeah, it can be that simple. It's a matter of shifting your attention elsewhere and realizing that a lot of these thoughts only have as much power as we grant them, and they are no different really from the plant in the corner that I'm ignoring, the picture on the wall that I'm ignoring at the moment. It's all just stuff in the environment, stuff that's being brought to my consciousness that I can easily dismiss, and we're going to talk about that in more detail. And the other sentence or sort of thing I want you to remember is that you are where your attention is. So it's a simple strategy of changing your state, changing your changing your mood based on your attention. And it comes with practice, but if you're feeling bad, if you're feeling run down, whatever it is, if you're focused on your pain, you are where your attention is. So what if you shift your attention? What if you shift your attention towards feeling good, towards something positive, towards whatever it is? It can be a really powerful thing, and with time that will become convincing. So I remind myself of these two things regularly. So you can't want what you're not thinking about. That's the first thing. And then you are where your attention is. And so when habit voice pops up and tries to discourage me from doing my new good habits, I simply dismiss it and I shift my focus onto something else. And it could literally be anything. Just focus on the nearest object to break that link and to move on to whatever you can. And so, like I said, it could be absolutely anything. Something comes up and you're worried about work, you're worried about whatever, you're worried about money, you're worried about your pain. Straight away, you're shifting your focus onto anything. I'm shifting my focus now onto the chopping board, onto the plant, onto the sky outside, onto the trees, onto a bird that just flew by. Whatever it is, and you might do it to a few things. You might hop, and just find something that you can just kind of immerse yourself in and break that link, sort of silence and dismiss that habit voice that's discouraging you from doing the things that you know you need to do. And it does become easier with time, and it may sound again too simplistic, and it may sound ridiculous, but it can be that easy, and it does come with practice. So back to this idea of dismissal of habit voice. So I made the distinction of when the habit voice shows up, I dismiss it versus ignoring it. So the important distinction is to dismiss rather than to ignore, because ignoring is acknowledging it and trying not to pay it any attention. With dismissal, you simply move on to other things. You brush it off, and you go about your business. You don't give it any power. When you're ignoring something, you're giving it a certain amount of power. And a lot of this is sort of conceptual. It's very much for you, and it's subjective. I want you to think about it in the sense of, I'm just brushing it off and I'm just orienting my focus elsewhere, and you just keep doing that until you've broken that loop, and it gets easier and easier. So if you're unsure about what your habit voice would sound like, there are some sort of general themes that come up. So the first one would be cynicism, and that would be a lack of belief in your ability to change or improve. So just being generally negative, dismissive, whatever it is. Oh, I can't do that. Don't bother, that sort of thing. Another one is perfectionism, which can sound really, really reasonable, and it's just a feeling or a need for perfection, and it's basically you're never taking action because you're waiting for, quote, the right time. See this in jiu-jitsu, for example. people don't want to start because they want to wait till they're fit, and they're like, it's not the right time, I won't start today, I'll start next week, I'll start in a year, or, I'll get fit this year and then I'll start, or whatever it is. We've all got these reasons for why now's not quite the right time, and it's very easy to pass that off as, look, I'm a stickler for high quality, and I don't want to do it unless I do it perfectly. But that's often habit voices really elaborate and really convincing ways of discouraging you from doing something different and keeping you in this safe life that it's familiar with. So perfectionism, you can look out for that in your life. That's something personally I dealt with a lot. For example, even with this podcast, it's changed a lot from the start, and it's gotten better in terms of production value, in terms of having an intro, in terms of having music, in terms of having all that sort of stuff. And if I just waited until I had it all right, and I still don't have it all right, for example, yes, this is a more specific example. I'm having someone record or edit an intro video for this, and I'm in the process of negotiating that with that person, and I could easily have said, I won't record this current podcast until I have that, which would put me off for at least a week and all that sort of stuff. But I've become aware of my perfectionist voice that would discourage me, and said, no, it's fine, I'll just do this now, and the next one will be a bit better because I'll have that. And because if I didn't do that, I wouldn't have 18 episodes of a podcast. I would have none, because I'd be waiting for the perfect time. And I think it's better to have 18 imperfect podcasts that have some degree of value to someone than to have nothing and to keep putting things off. So pay attention to perfectionism in your life, because it can sound really, really reasonable. And that's, if you feel that come up for you a lot, that's a nice avenue to delve into. Again, going back to our last episode, this episode is very much a continuation from the last episode. You want to delve into these themes that come up and say, where does this come from? Why do I have this need for perfectionism? And you can delve into that, and that can be fun. Now, the next kind of theme you want to look for in habit voice is negativity. It's why bother? This is pointless. And it basically talks you out of doing something by devaluing it. And you'll see this a lot in sort of making fun of people, laughing at people who are trying to be better. There's certainly this trend of, not a trend, but it happens a fair bit, that you'll see people doing things to make themselves better. They're exercising, they're eating well, they're doing whatever it is. And you're just like, that's stupid. Why would you bother? There's no point. Why would you do that? Whatever it is. And it's just this air of negativity, and always finding a negative slant on things. And that can be really tough. And again, a lot of these things, you're going to see them probably in others before you see them in yourself. And it's that negativity, like when you're around people and there's always a negative slant on something. And it gets really draining. And there's reasons why they say that you need to surround yourself with positive people and people who uplift you, and how people do tend to outgrow each other. There are people that I'm no longer really close with, because we obviously have different priorities. And luckily I haven't experienced this in such a great extent, but I know people who basically it's become quite clear that their friends don't really want them to change or grow, and they're not happy for them when something good happens. You get a promotion, you're going to pursue this, you have a new interest in whatever, and it's exciting for you, and they're like judging it, or they're seeing it negatively, and they're put off by that, and that negativity, and it's really sapping. And it's like I said, you're going to see it in your friends or people probably before you see it in yourself. But look out for that immediate negative slant on something. Something good happens and you're like, yeah, well, we never know what might happen, or things could still go wrong. And I find I still have a certain amount of unconscious negative spin. So for example, if I do my visualizations, I tend to visualize, the things I want. One thing in particular, let's get personal. One thing in particular, I really want to build a house. I used to want to be an architect, and I really want to build a house one day. And so I've built it in my head. I've designed it in my head. I've drawn blueprints, physical, crappy blueprints, and I have it vividly in my head. And so part of my visualization is I just walk through that house and I live in that house. And what tends to happen a lot is that when I'm doing these visualizations, something bad happens. Like someone robs the house, there's an intruder, there's something bad, and I'm like, this is so annoying. But I'm often there creeps in this negative slant on it, and I've delved into it, and I understand the reasons for it, and I won't go into that because maybe that's too personal. But I can't remember exactly what point I was making, but the point is that this negativity, it can be really permeating, and it can be really, really deep. And a lot of these things, they work at conscious and unconscious levels. So the first thing you're going to conquer usually is the conscious negativity, the conscious perfectionism, the conscious cynicism. And you're going to see that it's ridiculous, and you're going to say, okay, yeah. But then they're still going to creep up unconsciously, say in your visualizations, or say in your unconscious habits. So there can be a fair bit of digging and exploring with these things, but again, it starts with awareness and conscious awareness of the issue, and then you can tackle it and go deeper and deeper. So like I said, negativity is a really, really big one, and it's just I think part of it can be cultural as well. I don't know, in Ireland we seem to like taking each other down a peg. When people do well, there seems to be a lot of slagging, we would say, a lot of making fun of people, and it's all in good fun, and it's all sort of the culture, but that permeates, and I think that has more of an effect than we realize. And what you have is, what you seem to have is a lot of just kind of unnecessary negativity that I think can hold us back. So there's some food for thought. Now the next sort of characteristic theme you would see with the habit voice is defeatism. So basically you question your ability to achieve or perform something, and you might say, who do you think you are? Who am I to even do this? And I went through this a lot. Who am I to be talking to you about pain, about back pain, about whatever? I mean, I've trained for it, and yes, I've got all this amount of experience, but there's someone else who has an extra year of experience, and there's someone else who has an extra 20 years of experience, and there's someone else who maybe just has more confidence in themselves. Point is, you'll often feel like there's someone better than you, or why bother, because you're probably going to lose anyway, or maybe you've always lost in the past, and why would this be any different? But things like imposter syndrome, and you might have that maybe in your job, you might have that in sports, or whatever it is, or whatever you do. But it's this idea that, who am I to be doing any of this? And another thing that goes even deeper and deeper is learned helplessness, and it's essentially a state where you've simply accepted defeat without any struggle or retaliation. So you've resigned yourself to failure and nihilism, and what's the point? We're all going to die anyway. We're all just, and it's an interesting thing that you see a lot nowadays with, I think, with the progression of science and space, and we're like, who are we? Look, the universe is so huge, and I'm just this little speck, and it doesn't matter. And there's always sort of like a fork in the road when you have these realizations. You can either be like defeated by that, or be sort of uplifted, and how lucky am I to be living in this, versus I'm pointless, I'm meaningless in all this, and my life doesn't matter. So you want to look out for that defeatism. And that one might be one that's sort of obvious to see. And a lot of that can actually come down to your internal physiology, particularly the learned helplessness. When you're in a state of chronic physiological stress, when your body is basically chronically stressed and your hormones have changed, your physiology has changed, you can induce this state of learned helplessness where everything is pointless, or you feel like you can't succeed, like you don't have any power in your life. You could try your best, you could do everything you can, but it's never going to work because you are the victim and you're trapped in this system that you can't control. And again, that's this huge topic. But all of these issues, all of these kind of tendencies are on some level rooted in chronic physiological stress, because if your body is low on energy and it's unable to use energy properly, then it's hard for it to think clearly, it's hard for it to think rationally, and it's hard for it to think critically. It's going to default towards more negative, more protective, more safety based ways of thinking. So I'm talking a lot about the ways of thinking, but we can't forget how much your internal physiology sets the stage for your ways of thinking. So I just thought I should make that point. Now, the next big thing that you want to look out for to kind of reveal habit voice in your life is complacency. That's thinking you know everything and that you're maybe above doing certain things and looking down on others' achievements. Anyone could do that, and saying things like that, that's easy, or again, why bother, and I could do a better job, and being dismissive as a way of shielding your own inadequacy. And again, you can look to people look to friends, look to maybe people you don't like, that's even easier again, and see that come up. They're always dismissing things, or like, or they're thinking, I don't need to do that, I don't need to work hard, I'm fine. And it can be a way of shielding yourself from failure. It's hard to fail if you don't even try in the first place. And now I'm wishing I remembered it's a Homer Simpson quote, but it's something about not even trying in the first place, because if you don't try, then you can't fail. So yeah, that's another big one. The next one is escapism. So habit voice questions the reason for doing things at all. It diverts your attention to things that are, quote, more important, or to something that seems related but is easier. That's a really key point. I have to do this, but I could just do this. It's just as good. It's a bit different, but it's just as good. And deep down that it's not as good of an option. So I don't know, take exercise as an example. I'll go for a run. It's raining. I'm not really feeling too good. I'll just go for a walk up and down the stairs, or I'll go tomorrow, or whatever it is. I'll watch an exercise video. You find those are probably bad examples, but you find something that is marginally easier, that appears to be roughly the same, but you can justify on some level that it's the same, it's an equivalent, but it isn't. And again, it's this really elaborate way of your body just kind of protecting you. And it can also come in the form of, it's the path of least resistance. It's immediate gratification. So, it's that experiment with children. I think they have like a box of donuts and they're stale, and it's you could eat one now, or you could wait 10 minutes and you could have 2 donuts and they'll be fresh donuts and whatever. And your ability to have the discipline to wait for the fresher donuts and wait for the bigger reward, and delay gratitude. So again, look for that in others, look for that in your enemies, look for that in your friends, and look for that in yourself, and begin to build a picture. Now, the final kind of main theme that you see from habit voice is, I'm not even sure if it's a word, but I have it written down. It's delayism. And it's, you question the need to do it now. You can do it later. It's procrastination. I'd rather do something else. It's not the right time. I don't have the money right now. And these can seem really fair and reasonable, but you have to ask yourself, and these can be hard because sometimes there are genuine reasons why you can't do it right now. You're at work and you're like, I'm gonna get fit, I'm gonna go on a run, and maybe you can't go on a run then. So obviously that's a reasonable excuse, but it's gonna sound like, say on a Thursday, you're like, look, I need to change something. I need to do better. I need to start exercising. I need to start eating well. I'm starting on Monday. You start right now, because that's delayism. That's procrastination. And there's no real reason why you should start on Monday. That's a construct in your head. Or even worse, it's like it's August and you're like, I'm gonna say a jiu-jitsu example because I hear of those all the time from the club. I'm going to start jiu-jitsu, and you're like, it's August, you know what, I'm going to start jiu-jitsu. I need to do this. I've been wanting to do this. I'm going to sign up in January. I'm going to wait 4 months to sign up then. And like, I get it. Like, I'm not even making fun of it. I've been there. I do that. I did that. I think I signed up for jiu-jitsu in November to start in January, and then I started in March. But I've stuck to it, and now I do it all the time. But I went through that, the classic, get the idea, and even then I've been putting it off and off and off. But the point is, you begin to recognize that, and you begin to notice and overcome it consciously and then unconsciously, and then it becomes automatic. So I've found that simply being aware of these strategies can be enough to stop them from derailing your efforts. So a lot of this is, hopefully, I give you the awareness of this, you notice it in your life, and then that gives you a second to pause and change direction. It gives you an opportunity to course correct, and that snowballs into better outcomes over time. So many of these things. Sorry, I misspoke. Let me check my notes again. Again, this is why I need notes, because I will ramble and go off topic. So like I said, many of these excuses essentially seem reasonable. They're really reasonable. I don't have time is a big one. So it's easy to go along with them without giving them a second thought. And so now that you're aware of them, I want you to seek to find them in your day-to-day life. And once they show up, I want you to use the simple strategies to move past them and to stay on the right path. And you'll find that the more you practice these, the easier it becomes. So again, it's that idea of shifting your focus, turning your attention to something else when something shows up in your head. And I think you're going to find that it's surprisingly easy to do that when something, and this is more for bad habits like, oh, I want to eat ice cream. Shifting your focus, it can be surprisingly easy and surprisingly effective. So the idea of shifting your focus, as well as having increased awareness of your ways of avoiding positive behaviors, that's the first step in this process. To notice the habit voice and become familiar with your habit voice, because it's different for everyone, and you can give your habit voice a name, a sort of Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing. That's an exercise that maybe I'll do in another episode. But you have your, I forget, Jekyll's the good one, Hyde's the bad one. I forget. Either way, the good one is obviously the good habits that you have and that you need, and then the Hyde is it's that side of you that comes out every now and then, and that if you let that side of you win in 5 years' time, in a year's time, in whatever amount of time, you would be in a crappy situation. So that's that desire when you wake up some mornings to just have pizza for breakfast and then sit on the couch all day. And again, obviously with all this, there's always nuance, there's always individual interpretation, because sometimes maybe you need to just eat pizza for breakfast and lie on the couch and not feel bad about it. So I'm not saying it's a simple good and bad, clear-cut thing, but you need to know yourself. You need to know your Jekyll and Hyde. You need to know your habit voice to notice it and to begin to change it. So hopefully you should know what bad habits are holding you back from being the person you want to be. So you've got this goal of being pain free and all the things that come with that. Hopefully you, at this point, you have a sense of what's holding you back and what steps you need to take to get there. If you don't, you may want to listen to the last episode again if you've already listened to it, but listen to that and do all the accompanying exercises in the resources that are writing and self-reflection exercises, and they're going to help clarify that for you. But some examples of the most common negative traits that we can have that are holding us back are, we touched on this a bit before, procrastination, going to bed late, seeking instant gratification, lack of commitment, that's a really big one, lack of consistency, another really big one, and then small things, well, not necessarily small, but too much time on social media. Again, that can be a huge thing for you, maybe too much time on social media. I certainly benefit from minimizing time on social media. But again, hopefully you should have a good sense of which of these negative traits affect you the most. And now we can talk about strategies, So the first step is we have an awareness of how our habits manifest and how our habit voice directs our life to keep us safe and to essentially prevent us from getting better on some level. Now we can talk about eliminating bad habits, and after that we're going to talk about introducing good habits. So this is a very simple template for eliminating bad habits, and this is going to be in the resources. And the first point is to pick one habit that you want to eliminate, and it should be obviously a habit that would make a difference to your life. And I would say pick one versus pick 20 or pick 5. Start with one, start small, and give yourself some easy wins to get things snowballing. The second thing is, it can be helpful to make a declaration about eliminating this bad habit, and you can sort of create an unbreakable standard when you make a declaration. So you can say, I always go to bed at 10 p.m. I practice my breathing every day for 5 minutes. You want to make it a positive statement, and you want to declare what you will do rather than what you plan not to do. So I always go to bed at 10 p.m. rather than I never stay up past 10 p.m. or I never go to bed late. You want to make it a positive statement, and you want to declare it. You can write it, you can declare it to the world, whatever. It can be really helpful to sort of embody what you're doing and to give it a physical manifestation. The third point is to make a decision. Again, it's the same as making that declaration. Make a decision. This is what I'm doing, and you just decide, I'm doing this now, rather than I suppose I'll try and eat healthier. You say, I'm going to eat this. I know I eat healthily now. Positive statement, and you declare it. Fourth point is to deal with doubt, and you sort of want to address the parts of you that don't want to let go of this habit. And we touched on this in the last episode. So again, if you haven't listened to that, and if you haven't done the resources, the exercises, you're going to want to go back and do that. And that's going to look at what you essentially gain from holding on to this habit. So procrastination, for example, is a big one. What do you gain from holding on to procrastination, to continue procrastinating? Well, you gain safety from failure, because if you don't begin to do the thing, then you can't fail the thing. Again, Homer Simpson quote. I'll have to find that quote. So if you don't do the thing in the first place, then you're not going to fail, or you're going to put off failure because maybe you feel failure is inevitable. But at least you put it off, and you're putting off that negative experience. So you sort of want to deal with that doubt, and what part of you doesn't want to quit that bad habit. And it's helpful, again, we touched on this in the last episode in the resources. You want to think about where you're going to be in 1 to 5 years, 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, if you don't quit. You want to paint a picture of a life that you want to avoid. Because we all know, and I said this earlier, we all know that if we just indulged every little weakness in ourselves, where we would be in 6 months' time, in a year, in 5 years. how drastically things could change and how much worse things could change, or how bad things could still be, because maybe you are indulging that voice and that's really painful for you. And maybe the idea of, because you're always thinking, well, it's going to be different then, maybe the idea of knowing that in 5 years you're going to be exactly where you were, but you're going to have a bigger hole to climb out of. Maybe knowing that, well, certainly knowing that is going to be helpful, and it's going to give you something nice and concrete to know what you're avoiding. And again, that comes down to having a very clear goal and having a very clear idea of who you need to be versus who you want to avoid being and becoming. So the next point number 5, is to give yourself time to change. So it may take months, perhaps years, perhaps several determined efforts over years. So perhaps you'll try it and then you'll fail, and then you'll try it again and you'll fail, and there'll be gaps of months in between. But it's a journey, and that's something I've touched on a bit before, and I'm going to do another podcast on eventually. You sort of have to embrace and accept the fact that this is a journey, and that health is just a continuous effort. You don't attain health once and then we've got it, and then it's in our hands, and then we never let go of it. We need to keep earning it on a day-to-day basis. So you sort of, there can be a mindset shift there of accepting that a lot of these things are going to take time. And one thing I've personally found helpful is, I think it's called the Kaizen method. It's this idea of being 1% better every day. And I'm not always 1% better every day. Sometimes you go back, and sometimes you sort of stand still, and sometimes I don't really think about it, and it's just another average day. But the point is, I'm better than I was 6 months ago, and a year ago, and 5 years ago, and so on. And you're generally trending in a positive direction rather than standing still. And you're accepting that it's going to take some time. It is possible to do it really quickly, but it may well take some time, and you need to sort of accept that. So in terms of, apparently scientifically what it takes to eliminate bad habits, if suppose you're perfectly disciplined, apparently it takes an average of 67 days to eliminate a bad habit or create a new good habit. So that's without fail. If you're consistent for 67 days, that's the average. It can take as little as 3 weeks. I think it can take up to 3 months. And obviously it can take years, because again, sometimes you fall off the wagon and you keep trying and it gets easier and easier, but it's a struggle over time. But the point is to understand that it's going to take time, and to just accept that and not discourage yourself. So point number 6 is to recognize habit voice. Again, that's the first part of this episode. You want to recognize that chatter and that pressure to give in, and to notice the stories you tell yourself and the justifications, all the rationalizations for why you shouldn't do the thing that you know you need to do. And a certain amount of it is always going to be there, for the rest of your life. There's always going to be that voice that says, don't jump into the cold water. But and that's just life. Again, maybe there's a mindset shift for you there, accepting that a lot of these things are going to be lifelong struggles. I don't want to say the word struggles, because that's maybe a strong word, and that's maybe giving it too much power, but some of these things are just going to be lifelong efforts, and you just kind of need to accept that life is always going to be challenging in some way, but that's a positive thing. Maybe you can put a positive spin on that. Now, point number 7 is that setbacks mean nothing. So you're going to, I don't want to say that you're going to have setbacks, because you may not have any setbacks, and that would be perfect, that would be ideal. But realistically, it's quite likely that you're going to have setbacks. You're going to fall off the wagon, you're going to take on too much too soon, or you're just going to be overwhelmed by other things in your life, and you're not going to be able to keep up with your efforts. The really important thing at that point is to not give that any meaning, not give that any power. So you always sort of have an option when things happen to you with how you process. You have thousands of options with how you process and interpret that. The key is to not let that derail. So if you're going on this diet, whatever it is, you're eating well, and then you binge on something To be honest, if you're feeling the need to binge, then there's probably something wrong with your diet, and that's a bigger topic, and that's something that I can refer you to other people who specialize in that. But suppose you're eating well, and then you binge and you eat lots of chocolate cake and whatever, and then you're like, oh, I'm a terrible person, I'm a failure, I should just kill myself, I should just give up. That's a bit extreme. I hope that doesn't come to mind for you. But that can happen, and that's obviously not productive. And what you can do is like, oh, okay, I slipped up. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the chocolate cake, good cake. I'm just going to get back on the wagon. I'll get back on it tomorrow. I'll get back on it now. Don't put it off. But just, try and control the way you interpret and the power that you give these things, and ensure that they don't, when setbacks happen, don't give them this power to completely derail your efforts and devalue your sense of self and your self-respect. Point number 8 is to dismiss rather than ignore. So you're going to have urges, you're going to have desires to do something, to eat the chocolate cake. Try to dismiss that rather than ignore it. Ignoring could be like, I'm not going to eat the chocolate cake, I'm not going to eat the chocolate cake. Versus dismissing is like, swing your attention elsewhere. Just shift your focus onto something else, get yourself busy. And I want to sort of make the caveat that cravings, intense cravings for food, I think aren't necessarily something that we want to ignore. I think they're generally fairly reliable signs that your body is lacking something, unless you've got some really, really severe hormonal disruptions. I can't go into specifics on that today, and probably in any episode for now, because I feel I can't do it justice. But what I will say is, if you find you get intense cravings for things, dismissing isn't necessarily the thing to do. Maybe you need to look deeper and see, why are you having such intense cravings? Because maybe your body is sending you signals that it needs certain things, because your body is very, very smart. That's a point I make a lot, is that you trust the wisdom of feeling sleepy, of feeling thirsty, of feeling sad, of feeling angry, of feeling whatever. But when it comes to hunger, surely that's just a ruse. That's just some elaborate ploy to sabotage and kill me. We got this really disordered way of thinking about how we eat. And that's, like I said, that's a huge topic. So you shouldn't necessarily dismiss that. But the general rule, the general way we want to approach eliminating bad habits is to dismiss and to shift our focus rather than ignore that urge. So when your habit voice chimes in, simply dismiss it, brush it off your shoulder, say, yeah, and direct your focus elsewhere. And that's the final point, is to move your attention. Simply redirect your attention to anything or series of things until you break the habit voice loop, and just keep moving. And it can help to have a series of things that you think about, and you can plan this out and say, anytime I think about that, I'm going to shift my focus to this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to get up off my desk and walk around. I'm going to text a friend, whatever it is. Just get into a habit of breaking that loop in some sort of positive way. Now, this is, I don't know, do you call this a mantra? Maybe it's a mantra, but it's a framework, and it's something I want you to write down if you can. But again, it's going to be in the notes, so don't worry. But it's something you can remind yourself of on a regular basis, and it is, you are the thinker of your thoughts. Sorry, I'll say that again. You are the thinker of your thoughts, and being the thinker of your thoughts, you can think whatever you want. And the point of this is that your thoughts are your own, and it can be very easy to feel like you are at the mercy of your thoughts. And if you're at the mercy of your thoughts, it's usually because something is disrupted internally. There's some sort of chronic physiological stress that's making you prone to negative and unhelpful thoughts. But ultimately, supposing that you address that, you are in control of your thoughts. They're your thoughts, and you can direct them and you can control them and you can manipulate them. And it can take practice, but the point is that you have that capacity. And so right now, maybe you feel like you're at the mercy of your thoughts. If something hits you, if something comes to your awareness, then you're stuck in that. And it may very well feel like you're stuck in that, but ultimately you have the power to break that cycle and to change those thoughts because they are your thoughts. But like I said, there is a physiological, nutritional component to that. But there is also a simply mental component of you need to realize that you can change your thoughts and you can control your thoughts, and that's going to come with practice. So as you begin to implement all of these strategies, it's going to become easier and easier. So that's the basic formula for eliminating bad habits, and now we can talk about creating new, more helpful habits, and these are the habits you're going to need to succeed. And this goes back to the question, the very important question that we posed in the last episode is, who do you need to be to have the outcomes you want? And so you ask yourself, who would I be, what would I do, and how would I feel if I already had fill in the blank? If I already had a pain-free, reliable body, how would I feel? What would I do? Who would I be? And we work from that point of view. So who is that person? So I'll use myself as an example. So now I'm at that stage where I've overcome the pain. And so who am I now? I'm more disciplined. I'm more compassionate towards myself. I'm less stressed. I'm more able to just kind of trust the flow of life and just kind of go with things and not feel like I need to control everything. I'm more active. I do the things I want to do. I don't overthink things as much. I go on a hike. I go to the sea and I go swimming in the cold water, and I actually eat more. And so you paint that picture of who you need to be. So this is who I've become now, and I wasn't those things before. So I needed to bridge that gap. I needed to become that person. And so you want to identify the habits that help you bridge, from who you are now to who you need to be. And so examples of these, the habits that you need to implement, could be things like a daily mobility or movement routine. So at the height of my pain, I had no positive relationship with my body, no awareness of my body. I had no movement practice. I didn't really exercise anymore because of the pain, but then also I had no, I'd stopped sports, but I also had no physical existence. That sounds silly, but I didn't stretch, I didn't move, I didn't have any awareness of my body didn't move in a variety of ways throughout the day, every day. So I needed a daily mobility routine, I needed a movement routine, I needed to reconnect with my body. And I think that's a non-negotiable thing. We need to be able to inhabit our bodies. We need to be able to be comfortable and aware and in control of our bodies. So that's sort of, as far as I can tell, a non-negotiable thing. I needed a breathing practice. I didn't have a breathing practice. I had terrible breathing issues, and I just had no awareness of my breathing. And that's something I have now, and that's something I work on now continuously. I didn't have high quality sleep, whereas now I still have room for improvement, but I have far better sleep habits. I didn't have that then. Better nutrition, sufficient nutrition. So these are things that we need to implement, and there's a very important distinction between good nutrition and sufficient nutrition. Again, I've talked about that in nutrition podcasts in the past. But it's this idea that you can eat well, but maybe you're not eating enough, or you can eat badly, but you're eating enough. And what you want is to eat well and to also eat enough. But yeah, where are you now? Is nutrition something you've been neglecting? Is there room for improvement? And that can be a hard one to realize, because we tend to think we're doing the right thing because there's so much terrible information on nutrition. So go back to my episode on nutrition for pain for clarity on that. But That could be something that you need to change. One positive habit that you need to implement is to eat better, or to prepare your meals so that you're not always hungry, so that you have a regular source of energy to keep stress hormones down. Maybe that's a habit. So to deconstruct that could be a habit of, I need to prepare my meals every night. I need to prepare 4 meals for the following day, or 5 meals, or whatever it is. That's what it might take. And so that could be the habit, is to get into food preparation and implementing that. Things like time outdoors, planning and following a schedule. That's a big one. Do you have self-integrity? Can you follow a schedule? Can you do something from start to finish? Can you manage yourself, or do you need someone over you telling you what to do? So these are all positive habits that you may need to implement in order to get where you need to be, or where you want to be. So that's just to kind of get you thinking, get you having a sense of where you need to go and what you need to do. So now this is the template for starting a new habit. So the first thing is to choose a simple habit. You want to pick something realistic and manageable. So again, suppose a major part of your pain is elevation of stress hormones, anxiety, poor sleep, and you've got a not so ideal diet. A simple habit would be food preparation. Making sure that you've planned the week so that you know what you're eating and you know when you're eating it, and so that your body always has a source of energy, so that it doesn't need to rely on stress hormones for energy. Because if your body doesn't have energy, it needs to keep going, so it'll release stress hormones. So I found that was a major factor in my own pain. I've seen it a lot. It doesn't tend to be acknowledged, but that could be a way of addressing that. Rather than saying, I'm going to change my diet, maybe you pick something very small, like, I'm going to prepare my food, I'm going to plan my week of eating, and I'm going to know what I'm eating. So that's a simple habit. Every night, food preparation, or maybe 2-3 nights a week, food preparation for a couple of days. So the second point is then to control your environment and your micro habits to facilitate your macro habits. So things like having your gear ready to go, your gym equipment ready to go, have your food prepared, as I said, have your alarms and reminders set for the week, remove distractions and temptations from your sight. It's all fairly basic stuff, but make sure it's as easy as possible to complete that task. And the next thing would be, point number 3 would be to write the new habit down and to define it very clearly and to define its parameters. You want to make it specific. So for example, you could say, I'm going to do 7-11, which is a type of breathing, 7-11 technique of breathing for 5 minutes every day while on the bus into work. So that's your very clearly defined parameter of this new habit. So you say that rather than saying, I'm going to do some breathing every day. That's vague. You don't know when you're going to do it. You don't know how much you're going to do it. And it's very easy to dismiss. Whereas if you define it clearly, you define the parameters, you define when you're going to do it, it's much easier to do it. Another example would be, I'm going to switch electronics off at 9 p.m. and go to sleep at 10 p.m. every night this week. Very, very clear. You know exactly what you need to do. You know exactly when you've failed that standard, versus what you might be inclined to say is, I'm going to go to bed earlier this week, or I'm not going to go to bed late this week. It's very vague. It's open to interpretation. It's very easy for habit voice to come in there and be like, what's late? It's happy hour somewhere. Sorry, bad joke. But basically the clearer it is, the more clearly defined the parameters, the harder it is for that habit voice to come in with rationalizations. And it's also just less effort for you to stick to it, because it's like a pre-made decision. You've made that decision already. Oh yeah, I'm on the bus. Okay, yeah, I do my breathing. Versus, when will I do my breathing? Will I do it now? Should I do it on the bus? Oh yeah, I won't do it on the bus. Maybe I'll do it, and then you don't do it. So then step 4 is to do it for a week. So simply plan to do it for a week and just conquer that first, and then we're looking at doing it over time, and I'll talk about that later. Point number 5 is to track the habit. It can be really helpful to have a visual representation of your success or failure, because it makes it much harder to dismiss and to ignore the fact that you've failed. So there are apps for that, things like a habit tracker. There's a streak app, and it's like, you've gotten a streak of 7 days, here's a thumbs up and a dopamine hit. Or you can just do it on a calendar. You can cross off the days on the calendar, whatever. Simple things like that can be really helpful. Point number 6 is to create a habit cue or a time cue or some sort of activity cue. So you want to tie the new habit into something you do already, such as brushing your teeth or taking the bus or doing the dishes. Hopefully you brush your teeth every day, so that's just effortless. You just do it without any thought, and you can tie the new habit to that. And that's something that this is actually quite an interesting point, is that for a while I was training my grip strength for jiu-jitsu with one of those gyroscope ball things, where you spin it and it's like it's trying to fly out of your hand, and you have to hold on to it and spin it. And so my breakfast was, I would boil eggs, and so that's 6 minutes. So I have a timer for 6 minutes. I throw that on, and straight away I use the ball thing. And then I changed my breakfast routine. I wasn't eating boiled eggs anymore. I was eating pancakes, because I was moved up in the world. I was eating milk powder pancakes, and suddenly milk powder pancakes, they require you need to be cooking the whole time. You don't get to do something else for 6 minutes. So straight away that habit of training my grip strength was gone, and it didn't resurface in any other aspect of my life, and I just haven't done it in months. Which, it's funny again, and that's going back to not giving the failure any power over you. I could easily say, oh, I failed, because I'm not boiling eggs anymore, and I should be training my grip, but I can laugh about it, and not beat myself over it, because it's not that big of a deal, So that's I think a good example of how I had some other habit. I eat breakfast every day. That's something that's easy for me to do. I'd do that all day if I could, and it's easy to incorporate something into that. But as soon as that easy habit changed, then the tougher thing, which is training my grip strength, just fell off, and I just completely forgot about it. I didn't even realize initially that I'd stopped doing that, and then I was like, oh yeah, I used to train my grip strength while I was making my eggs. But anyway, just some food for thought for you there. Another thing you can do in terms of creating cues is to set alarms for specific times of the day that remind you to do specific things. So you could have an alarm that says, do your down mobility at whatever time, and you can set that. That can be helpful. Sometimes it's actually kind of annoying, your phone telling you to do your damn mobility, and you can maybe be defiant and say, I won't do my mobility. So maybe find what works for you in terms of that. And then the final point is to repeat, because repetition is the mother of all learning. And that's what I said, because realistically, you may have some setbacks, you may fall off the wagon, but just keep going at it, and it will become easier over time. And repetition is just going to ingrain these new habits. And the final thing is to start right now. Don't put it off. Maybe you're listening to this, you're feeling so motivated by my monotone motivating voice, and you're thinking, yeah, I'm going to do this, I'm going to change my life next Monday of next January, whatever it is. I get that, but don't do that, because that's your habit voice discouraging you from being a better person. So now what I would encourage you to do is to work through the resources in the resources section to get a good sense of your bad habits, and then to get a sense of the habits you need to adopt and how these all relate to your identity. So again, this is going to tie in very nicely to the last episode, so make sure you've listened to both of these. And you want to get a very clear picture of who you are, what influences are there in your day-to-day life, How do they dictate your life? How do they dictate your outcomes? And how can you change those in a very pragmatic, very practical way, in a very clear, concise way? Because we don't want to leave this up to chance. We want to be very clear and intentional with what we're doing and why we're doing it. And it can be very easy to just dismiss and be like, oh, it's all sorts of forces in my life. I don't know. I just go with the flow. Yes, go with the flow, but maybe know how to influence the flow. That's something to aim for. So you're going to find that as you go through these exercises, you're going to gain further clarity on your pain and how it's driven by your behaviors and beliefs. So gradually you're going to see opportunities for change in your day-to-day life, and you'll begin to steer things towards the life you want. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Physical Education Podcast. If you're the kind of person who likes to help others, then share this with someone in need. If you found value in the information here, they will too. So please share this in whatever way you can. If you have any questions, you can email me directly at pa@thebackpaincoach.net. I may even use your question for a future podcast episode. If you'd like more information to help you overcome pain, be sure to follow The Back Pain Coach on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube, and to join my newsletter. The major turning points in my own recovery have come from changes in perception and through learning more about myself. I believe that we can help others by sharing information that expands their minds. Finally, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave a positive review on iTunes or Stitcher so that others may find this information and you can play a positive role in their healing journey. Thanks again for listening.